in the process. If we get this right, the rest is a lot easier. If we get this wrong, then nothing will work. And identifying the target means to get a clear picture of how we see ourselves existing instinctively. And usually when we start the meditation to do this, often they say that, because when we sit down to meditate, the body gets relaxed, the mind gets relaxed, and then, because everything's very relaxed, we don't often have a very strong sense of me. So then as a beginner, it's quite difficult to get a clear picture of the me that seems to be here. So often in the meditation text, they'll say something like, imagine a situation, for example, someone is criticizing you for something you didn't do, or praising you for something. Usually if someone's criticizing or praising us, then usually we have a very strong sense of me. You know, how dare you criticize me? Oh, yes, I am wonderful, aren't I? Or another example sometimes you see is, imagine you're on the edge of a cliff, someone comes up behind you and nudges you a little bit. Then we have a strong sense of me. So, and that's the me that we identify with, that we grasp onto in our experiences. So that's the me we need to look for, because that's the me we're relating to. So that's this point here. And again, this is where usually people go wrong, is instead of getting a clear picture of how we see ourselves existing and then looking for that independent me that seems to be here, then often we turn this into an intellectual exercise. And we think about how we think we exist. And usually that's based on some sort of belief system. So again, if we've studied Buddhism, then we'll go, oh yeah, I'm the subtle mental continuum, I learnt that. Or in other traditions, yeah, I'm just subtle vibration, subtle energy, I learnt that, I accept that. And then of course, we use that to search for, and of course we find something. We see the subtle energy, we see the flow of the mind, we go, yep, that confirms it, I'm there. But then we're not doing the practice, because again, in our behaviour, particularly when we're reacting with jealousy and anger and craving, we're not relating to subtle mental continuum or subtle energy when we react in that way. That's not the me we identify with. So we want to have this clear picture. If we have that, the rest goes pretty easy. So the second step is and again, I'm using terminology from His Holiness's book. He calls it limiting the possibilities. The technical word here in the text is establishing the pervasion. What this means is that if there is an independent me here, it must be findable, and it can only exist in one of two places. Either it's the same as the body and the mind, or different than the body and the mind. So if we look in those two places and don't find it, we know it does not exist. So that's the second step, is just knowing where to look. That if it exists, it must be findable, therefore it can only be the same as the body and the mind, or different than the body and the mind. And if we look in those two places and don't find it, it does not exist. So that's the second step. And then we search. We look, is it the same as the body and mind or different? And we can do that search in either order. The one we did in the meditation now, and the one that's often described, is first, is it the same as the body and the mind? So we look everywhere in the body and the mind and see if we can find that me. And then if we can't find that me somewhere within the body and the mind, it must be different than the body and the mind. And so in that meditation then at one point I said, well, apart from the body and the mind, well, what else is there here? And then you look to see if there's something separate or in addition to or different from the body and the mind here. And if we don't see that anything, we've looked in 2 places, then it can't exist. So if we do this search thoroughly, methodically, and don't find, then that is an understanding that it's not findable. So when we don't find, we simply rest in that experience of not finding. But remember, this experience of not finding is not simply we didn't find it, but it's realizing it's not findable. So of course, in general, if we search for something in a room and we don't search thoroughly, we may have not found it, but we didn't establish that it's not findable in the room because we didn't search everywhere. So therefore, it's important to search everywhere, because otherwise if we just search one place and we don't see it, then maybe it's somewhere else. So if we search everywhere that it could be and we don't find it, the not finding implies it's not findable. It's not, that findable me does not exist. And so if we get to that point in the search, then stop searching and just rest in that experience of not finding. That's an experience of emptiness, and hold that experience as long as we can. That now becomes the object of shamatha, that experience of not finding, holding that. The more we can hold it, the more it will penetrate our mind, the more effect it will have following the meditation. Now, of course, what often happens is if we get to that point, then we try and focus on that experience, but then within a couple of seconds we get distracted or we space out. And then, of course, the recommendation is go back, do the search again. If you don't find, hold it again. Hold it as long as possible. Now, probably what a lot of you found in this practice is that it wasn't easy. And we got confused and we thought, well, is it here? Is it there? I'm not sure. I can't really see. And of course, that is because our mind is not very sharp and clear. So if we want this practice to be more effective, we need to do more shamatha practice, to cultivate a more calm, more clear, more focused mind. The more calm, more clear, focused, when we do the search, it'll work a lot better. Again, it's like the example I maybe mentioned the other day, is if we want to look for a particular person in a crowded room, and we don't have first a clear picture of what they look like, then of course we're not going to be sure. But even if we have a clear picture of them, but the room is dark or our eyesight's not very good, we can search a long time and not really come up with any conclusive answer. We'll go, well, maybe that's I'm not sure. So that's like now, without a calm, clear, focused mind, we're like that person trying to search in a dark room with bad eyesight looking for a particular person. So the more that we can develop shamatha, the more light we have in the room, the better the eyesight. The more easy it will be to determine, there they are, or no, they're definitely not in the room. So therefore shamatha is the basis for Vipassana practice. Okay. One other point and then some questions. Now, again, the most common point where we go astray is this first point, that we simply turn it into an intellectual exercise, and then of course we always come up with an answer because we have some sort of belief system in who we think we are, and we sort of just want to confirm that. And of course the other place is where we go astray is when we do the search, our mind is not very clear and focused, and then we just get confused and we're not sure and not much comes out of it. But sometimes if we do the search quite well and we get to the point of not finding, then again, as I already mentioned earlier, I think one of the most common experiences is fear, anxiety arising. And usually this is a very good sign. It means usually that we're doing the search in a very good way and we're correctly coming to see that the me is not findable, but we're misinterpreting that experience to mean that there's no me at all. Because remember, this is how we really believe we exist, and when we start to overturn that, we simply flip to the other extreme, because we only see 2 possibilities. Either there is this real findable me, or there's no me at all. So when we don't seem to be able to find it, we fall into nihilism. And then we maybe have something like existential fear, I don't exist, or I'm going out of existence. So again, to overcome that fear is to understand that not finding doesn't mean there's no me, it just means there's no independent me. And again, if there's fear arising, you can ask the question, who's having the fear? Because if you don't exist, there can be no fear. So the fact that fear is arising proves you exist. So that's how also to help overcome that fear. And of course, if we really appreciate that not finding doesn't mean no me at all, then instead of fear, we'll have a lot of joy arising in this practice. Because we'll realise the me that I've identified with in my entire life that's caused me so much mental afflictions and suffering simply doesn't exist. Okay, some questions.
Can you please repeat, starting from number 2? I didn't get the places we look.
Yeah, so here the target is that we grasp onto an independent me. So if the me is independent, it must be findable. We must be able to point and say, there it is, if it's findable, if it is independent. And therefore, the me can only exist in one of two places. Either it's somewhere the same as the body and the mind, or different than the body and the mind. They're the only two options. So the second one is understanding that where to look. We look, is it the same as the body and the mind, or is it different than the body and the mind? And if we don't find it in either of those two places, it doesn't exist. So that's the second step. Because if it's findable, it must be there. It's like if you want to find a person in a house, and you want to search the house, we need to know how many rooms or where to look. Because otherwise, if we go in the house and look in a room and we didn't see, we go, well, maybe there's another upstairs room or down, I'm not sure. Whereas if we know this house has 2 rooms, for example, if I look in room 1 and room 2 and I don't see them, they're not in the house. That's step 2. So we haven't started searching yet. We just know that if it's findable, it has to be either the same as the body or in the mind, or different than the body and mind. If I don't find it in either of those two places, it doesn't exist. And then we do the search in those two places.
So again, sorry, these two places are
the same as the body and the mind. So you look in the body, you look in the mind. If you don't find it there, the only other place is different than the body and the mind, which means that there must be something here other than the body and the mind.
Like a third entity?
Yes, exactly. So is there a third entity here that's not the body and the mind? Look. And if there's not, then there's no me.
And the same, number 3, can be also a combination of the body.
Yeah, we look in both. But, I mean, the combination is, it's a bit, we don't need to look, because again, in the house example, 2 rooms, if they're in this room or this room, if you look in this room and you look in this room, you don't need to look in the combination of the rooms, do you? I mean, if you didn't find them there or there, they're not in the house. We don't need, oh, maybe they're in the combination of the 2 rooms. But if you want to look simultaneously at the 2 rooms, okay, but I don't think it adds anything to the search. Yeah.
If I make a meditation about something like, should I go there or should I stay, or how do I feel? Is it all vipassana?
I didn't understand the question. So if you do a meditation about what, sorry?
Daily topic. Something from a daily life.
Right.
About my experience, about my husband, about the relationship.
Right. So as a general term, vipassana means to get insight. And we can get insight into all sorts of things. Like we can get insight into, why do I get angry so much? What sorts of stimulus make me angry? So this is a type of insight. But here, in Vipassana, this Vipassana practice, we're doing a very special sort of investigation. Those are also valid, but here, the investigation is, how do I exist? That's the particular investigation we're doing here. But yes, it's a valid experience, a valid meditation to look at what are the sorts of things that trigger my anger? Let's have a look at that. That's useful.
There's something for me, it's unconvincing. So I don't find something, then it's not independently existing.
Say again?
Like, I don't know, 100 years ago or 200 or 300, they didn't know what viruses were, right? They were not findable. You would only see their effects, but they were not findable.
No, they were findable, we just didn't find them. Not findable means doesn't exist.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Right.
If I'm not able to find something, it doesn't convince me that it doesn't exist.
Correct. So therefore you need to have equipment or faculty to look precisely. Exactly like the virus. Now our faculty of looking is poor. So like we didn't have a microscope, we don't see bacteria. That's like now. So therefore, the faculty of looking clearly is shamatha.
Yes, I understand that.
Right.
But still, even if I have amazing clarity and dullness and whatever, still I think, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that there are things that human experience I would not
Correct.
see. Like, I can't
Correct. Because, but here, we're not looking for something like that. We're looking for something that is completely evident to us. The me appears very clearly to us. We're looking for that me. So we're not trying to discover some subtle thing. We are trying to find the me that is in front of our face, the one that clearly appears to us. So, of course, the example would be that we're looking for a person in the house, we have a clear picture of the person. Then all we need to do is look and see if they're in the room. So again, we're not trying to find something subtle or something. We're looking for something that is right there in our experience, something that appears to us very clearly. So it's not we can't see the bacteria, it's here's an object, or here's something we're looking for. Does this object exist in this place or not? We can see this object. Does it exist here or not?
But me is an abstract object.
No, it's not. It's something that appears very clearly to us. The intellectual idea of me is very abstract. But we're talking about experience. We're talking about how we experience ourselves. This is appearing very clearly to us.
So maybe I'm not searching for the right thing. I don't know.
Probably. That's why I said this is the... Because what we do is we turn it into some abstract conceptual idea of who we think we are. But that's not the me that we identify with in our behaviour. The me that's getting angry. That, when we're getting angry, that me is very clear to us. Me. That's what we're looking for. Not for some abstract, subtle idea of who we might be. That's not of any interest here. Because we're not relating to that in our behaviour. We're looking for something that we identify with in our behaviour. Grasping onto this me. That's what we're looking for.
I hope that this is not the question that the Buddha said that he...
Probably.
Yes. But I wonder how come that from the first place, that stream of the clear and knowing awareness begin this wrong perception of me inherently exist and the world inherently exists?
There was no beginning.
Okay. So in that endless stream, it was already the stain of the inherently...
Correct.
This is what the Buddha said, that it was in... And we try what was in this stain, we try to remove them, although they were from beginningless time.
Yeah, but also remember when we look at this, we have to understand that there's no such thing as fixed linear time, objective time. As in physics, it doesn't exist. So remember also time is a concept. It only exists within the conceptual framework. I mean, science has proven there's no fixed linear objective time. You know, there's more dimensions, so that's okay.
How is the meditation that we just did different from the one that we did yesterday?
How is it different? Okay.
Yeah, for me, like the investigation was exactly the same.
Yeah. And they're very similar. And that's why I mentioned someone who's doing a sort of no-self meditation could come to realise emptiness if they're very sharp about that. But in that other meditation, it's easy to then hold on to the body and the mind as something sort of, okay, there's nothing extra called a self, but there's a body and a mind. Okay, that's good. I'm happy. So that's no self, but it's still holding on to body and mind. Whereas this one is, you know, you can go down levels and you won't find anything. So, but it is possible, it's true, that in a no-self meditation you can come to realise emptiness, sure, if you're very sharp about your investigation.
Is it would be beneficial to meditate instead of emptiness on independent arising?
Of course, by reflecting and meditating on dependent arising, this is very, very helpful. But the texts say that to directly realise this, directly, only comes after directly realising emptiness. But yes, of course, now sitting down and reflecting on dependent arising and meditating on it is very helpful. And if you do that, more likely than if you do an emptiness meditation, you're more likely not fall to the extreme of nihilism and have fear, because you have a better appreciation of this. So yes, that would be very helpful.
But it's more difficult than...
Well, it said that you can only realise this directly after you've realised this directly. Yeah, okay, yeah.
One is... I had a very, very tiny experience of being like absent. And
Being
absent.
Oh.
And like my shape is kind of contribution of the whole space or world, or suddenly it made a connection in my mind to dependent arising, because it was very brief, but it gave kind of gratitude to a general effort of the whole universe.
Sure. Yeah,
Support,
yeah, sure. And often this is how people come into this practice, through the vehicle of dependent arising. Particularly, you know, like sort of a classic example is you're out walking in nature, and due to the strength of the environment, the impression that it gives you, you temporarily drop the self-grasping, and then you have this sort of oneness experience. So this is very common to come in through that avenue. But of course what often happens is, if we don't follow that up, we just think, oh, yeah, I had a really nice experience 10 years ago. Really nice it was. Good memory.
Because for a minute when you said, who is this me that is training the mind and body, and I felt the opposite, like, again, with gratitude for the effort of body and mind to train me, to become me, to...
Yeah, sure. Okay.
And one more thing I wanted to say from before the break, and you said, you said it's okay to label things as long as we remember that we are labeling. And it made sense as meditation instructions, because actually it's during the mindfulness meditation, it's okay to recognize a thought as long as we remember it's a thought.
Exactly.
So I felt it's like application to
Sure.
daily life.
Sure, of course.
Just
Of course,
remember.
yeah, of course. Not so easy to see. We can, and that's part of, I'll talk maybe a bit more about that later, that's part of the daily life emptiness practice. It's called illusory-like emptiness practice. And it's to, in daily life, to not automatically accept appearances, and to understand that things are not really as they appear to exist, and that things are merely labelled. So if you can appreciate that, then you find that you'll have less reaction with attachment, aversion, and so forth. And that'll help feed back into the emptiness meditation, so they'll support each other.
When I was meditating, I usually have a very pain in my neck and legs for the whole 9 days. And I learned how to make them disappear. But this time I decided just to look into them, to see who is looking, and it was my body and my mind. And then you said, is it your body and your mind? And so I was in a way aware and not aware. Like I was very much aware and not aware at the same time. No thoughts almost. Then afterwards, like my lower body started to disappear. Like I didn't feel it. No, it was more feeling like disappearing.
Sure.
And I wanted it to go on, but no, it stopped like this. It's like, okay, this is it. So you just stay in this feeling or whatever you call it, I don't know.
Yeah, as long as there's some understanding in that. I mean, of course, simply sort of blanking out in this meditation is not an emptiness experience. I mean, there has to be some understanding in that experience.
But I don't know where me is.
No, we keep. I mean, this is a practice we'll need to do many, many, many times, repeatedly, of course. I mean, it's just like a scientist. You know, a good scientist doesn't run an experiment once and say, well, okay, that's the result. They'll run it again and again and again and again, many, many times to establish the result. And so that's what we need to do.
But then you say that eventually there is a me that will appear.
Not in that time, because we're looking for the independent me. So actually in that moment, the only thing appearing is an absence of independent me. After the meditation, if we're still in that, affected by that experience, of course me will appear, and we'll understand the me that appears is not independent. But in the experience, the only thing really appearing is that not findable, that absence, that's emptiness.
After not finding the me, the I, why should we think that there is something that is I? I mean...
Sorry, say again? After not finding
the me.
Right.
But you said that there is some me, but we just add on top of it some habits of putting other things that are not the me really. But
right. So the question is?
I was thinking when we looked at the diagram of Shamatha.
Right.
There was the elephant mind, there was the rabbit laxity, there was the monkey thoughts.
Yeah.
Who is the person in the diagram? So I thought, okay, this is the one who wants to meditate, right?
The meditator, yeah.
The meditator. The meditator is a part of the mind, isn't it?
Part of the mind?
No.
You're part of the mind? Don't you have a mind? If you have a mind, you can't be part of the mind. I mean, we're just being common sense here. You know, we have a body, we have a mind. So if we have a body and we have a mind, we can't be the body or mind, and we can't be part of the body and mind because we have a body and a mind. It's just common sense, isn't it?
Yeah, another common sense for me is saying when I have anger, I take out the I, there is anger. When
There can't be anger without grasping to independent me. Independent me causes anger. If you take that out, anger's gone. And that's right. If you were to realise this emptiness, and then that was still affecting your mind fully, after the meditation, fully, not just partially, fully, it'd be impossible to get angry. It'd be impossible to have attachment. Impossible. But often when that's affecting our mind a little bit, it's not fully there. It's a bit there. So it's a bit like lucid dream. You know, when we start developing lucid dream, we're lucid but not 100%. So there's sort of a little bit of a lucidity and